The Draconis Empire had perfected the art of profitable violence. For 12 centuries they had transformed ritual combat from a crude, barbaric practice into the galaxy's most lucrative entertainment industry. Their gladiatorial arenas stretched across 47 star systems, broadcasting live combat to audiences numbering in the trillions, with betting pools that could finance entire planetary economies. The secret to their success lay not in superior technology or exceptional warriors, but in understanding a fundamental truth about sentient beings. Everyone loves watching someone else get beaten up, especially when there's money involved and they're safely removed from the actual violence. The Draconis had refined this principle into an elegant business model. Scout teams would identify newly spacefaring civilizations, preferably ones that showed some capacity for violence but lacked the technology to pose any real threat. A diplomatic mission would arrive, bearing gifts and flowery speeches about interstellar brotherhood, eventually extending an invitation to participate in the grand tournament of species framed, naturally, as a tremendous honor. Most species accepted eagerly. The promise of galactic recognition, advanced technology prizes, and substantial monetary rewards proved irresistible to civilizations still struggling with basic space travel. What they discovered upon arrival was somewhat different from the promotional materials. The tournaments were indeed grand, but they were also lethal. Combat was real, injuries were permanent, and death was not uncommon. The Draconis had learned through centuries of experience exactly how to structure these events, give the newcomers enough victories against carefully selected opponents to maintain hope, then gradually increase the difficulty until the inevitable and highly profitable conclusion. It was, the Draconis believed, a perfect system. The audience got spectacular entertainment, the Empire got massive profits, and the participating species got valuable lessons about their place in the galactic hierarchy. Everyone won, except for the poor bastards bleeding out on the arena floor. But market research indicated that audiences found their suffering quite engaging. Ambassador Kyleth reviewed the latest batch of potential contestants with the practiced eye of someone who had been in the violence for property business for the better part of 3 decades. The crystalline Vexcorians showed promise. Their warriors could alter their physical density at will, making for visually impressive combat. The Aquatic Metali had developed some interesting bioelectric abilities that would photograph well under arena lighting. The insectoid Zektar possessed a collective consciousness that allowed for fascinating tactical coordination. And then there were the humans. Kyleth had initially dismissed them as unsuitable for tournament play. Their preliminary intelligence reports painted a picture of a species barely capable of interplanetary travel, with primitive technology and no apparent special abilities. They were soft-bodied bipeds from a mid-range gravity world, possessing no natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced physical capabilities of any kind. But then the cultural analysis team had intercepted some of their entertainment broadcasts. "Sir," his chief analyst had reported, barely containing what appeared to be amusement, "you need to see this. They've got an entire industry based on voluntary combat between members of their own species." The recordings were fascinating. Humans regularly gathered in large groups to watch other humans attempt to beat each other unconscious using nothing but their bare hands and feet. They had dozens of different combat formats, each with elaborate rules and scoring systems. They treated it as entertainment. More remarkably, they seemed to enjoy both participating and watching. The fighters displayed obvious pleasure in the competition, win or lose. The audiences cheered with genuine enthusiasm. There was none of the grim desperation or survival-driven aggression that characterized most species' combat behaviors. "They may fight for fun," the analyst had concluded, sounding slightly bewildered by the concept. Kyleth found this development intriguing enough to warrant further investigation. A species that treated combat as recreation might provide better entertainment value than the usual terrified primitives desperately fighting for their lives. If nothing else, they might last longer before succumbing to superior opponents, giving audiences more time to place bets and purchase concessions. The diplomatic mission to Earth was scheduled for the following month. The human homeworld was exactly as unremarkable as their preliminary reports had suggested. Single yellow star, mostly water, one large moon, standard atmospheric composition. The inhabitants had achieved basic fusion technology and established colonies on 3 other worlds in their system, but showed no signs of expanding beyond their local neighborhood. Lilith's ship entered orbit without challenge, broadcasting standard peaceful intentions on all frequencies. The humans responded within hours, directing them to a landing facility on their largest continent and expressing what their translation systems identified as curiosity about their visitors' intentions. The welcome ceremony was surprisingly elaborate for such a primitive species. Representatives from multiple governmental entities had gathered, along with what appeared to be journalists and various other observers. They seemed genuinely excited about first contact with an alien civilization, which Kyleth found both charming and slightly pathetic. The formal presentation went smoothly. Kyleth delivered the standard speech about interstellar brotherhood, galactic community, and the wonderful opportunities available to species ready to take their place among the stars. He presented gifts of minor technological trinkets that would seem impressive to a civilization still using chemical rockets, and extended the prestigious invitation to participate in the Grand Tournament of Species. The humans listened with polite attention, asked several detailed questions about tournament structure and rules, then requested time to consult among themselves before providing a formal response. "We appreciate the honor," said the lead human representative, a woman who introduced herself as Director Patricia Hawkins of the Terran Defense Coordination Office. "This is certainly an unexpected opportunity. We'll need to discuss this with our various governments and athletic organizations." Athletic organizations. Kyleth made a mental note to have that phrase double-checked by the translation systems. 3 days later, the humans provided their response. They would be delighted to participate in the tournament and had selected a team of representatives to accompany Kyleth back to Draconis space. They had one request: could they bring their own coach? The coach turned out to be a weathered human male named Marcus Briggs, who looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts and bad decisions. He had graying hair, numerous scars, and the sort of casual confidence that suggested he'd seen everything at least twice and hadn't been particularly impressed either time. "So," Briggs said during their first meeting aboard Kyleth's ship, "let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want our people to fight representatives from other species in front of a galactic audience, with the winners advancing through a tournament bracket until someone emerges as overall champion?" "That is correct," Kyleth confirmed. "It is a tremendous honor to represent your species in such a prestigious event." "And there's prize money involved?" "Substantial rewards for successful participants, yes." Briggs nodded thoughtfully. "What are the rules regarding performance-enhancing substances?" "I beg your pardon?" "Drugs, stimulants, genetic modifications, that sort of thing. What's legal and what isn't?" Kyleth consulted his notes. In 12 centuries of tournament operation, no species had ever asked about performance enhancement regulations. "I believe the standard policy is that contestants may use any capabilities natural to their species, plus any equipment or substances traditionally employed in their cultural combat practices." "Traditional combat practices," Briggs repeated. "That's interesting, very interesting indeed." Something in the human's tone suggested Kyleth might have overlooked an important detail, but the coach's expression remained pleasantly neutral. The journey to the tournament site took 18 days, during which Kyleth had ample opportunity to observe the human team. There were 5 of them, which seemed unusually small compared to the delegations from other species. Most civilizations sent their largest, strongest, most obviously dangerous individuals. The humans had selected what appeared to be a random sampling of their population. Elena Vasquez was a compact woman with alert eyes and efficient movements, who claimed to have been a soldier in human military forces. Dmitri Volkov was a large, bearded man from one of their polar regions, who spoke little but moved with surprising grace for his size. Kenji Tanaka was a smaller, faster human who had apparently spent years in something called competitive fighting circuits. Amara Okafor was a tall woman with the build of a distance runner, who described herself as a tactical specialist. The fifth team member, Jackson Reynolds, looked like an ordinary office worker and claimed his relevant experience was weekend mixed martial arts training. None of them appeared particularly impressive by Galactic standards. They lacked the obvious physical advantages of most tournament species: no natural weapons, no armor plating, no enhanced sensory capabilities. They were just soft-bodied bipeds with opposable thumbs and an inexplicable fondness for voluntary violence. But they all shared one characteristic that Kyleth found mildly disturbing. They seemed to be looking forward to the tournament. Most species representatives displayed appropriate levels of nervousness as they approached the arena. They understood, consciously or instinctively, that they were about to face superior opponents in lethal combat for the entertainment of alien audiences. Fear was the normal response. The humans showed no fear whatsoever. If anything, they appeared to be enjoying themselves. They spent their time exercising, reviewing footage of previous tournaments, and engaging in what appeared to be good-natured competition among themselves. Coach Briggs watched it all with the expression of someone who knew a secret he wasn't ready to share. The Grand Tournament of Species was held on Corfaxis Prime, a world that Draconis had converted entirely to entertainment purposes. The main arena could accommodate 500,000 spectators, with viewing facilities for another billion distributed across the planet's surface. The event was broadcast live throughout Draconis space and beyond, reaching audiences estimated in the hundreds of billions. This year's tournament featured 16 species, including several returning participants and a promising selection of newcomers. The Vexcorians were back, their crystalline warriors having provided excellent entertainment in previous years, despite never quite managing to win the overall championship. The Merthali had requested aquatic combat environments, which would add variety to the programming. The Zektar collective consciousness had never been seen before in tournament play, and early betting heavily favored their tactical coordination abilities. And the humans were given odds of approximately 3,000 to 1 against advancing past the first round. Opening ceremonies were spectacular, featuring traditional Draconis military displays, cultural presentations from each participating species, and ceremonial introductions of all contestants. The human team received polite applause from the audience, though several commentators noted their obvious physical disadvantages compared to other participants. "Ladies and beings," announced the primary commentator, "we have what appears to be the most physically unprepossessing species ever to enter tournament play. These humans possess no natural weapons, no apparent special abilities, and frankly look like they might have trouble opening a jar of pickles, much less surviving combat with genetically superior opponents." The secondary commentator agreed. Indeed, Vex Khan, early analysis suggests these creatures evolved as prey species on their homeworld. Their own entertainment broadcasts show them engaging in what they call sports, which appear to be elaborate rituals for determining which individuals are least likely to survive actual combat situations. Coach Briggs, watching from the team preparation area, smiled. The tournament bracket had been carefully structured to provide maximum entertainment value. Early rounds would eliminate obviously inferior contestants while giving audiences time to become invested in potential champions. Middle rounds would feature increasingly dramatic confrontations between evenly matched opponents. The final rounds would showcase the galaxy's premier warriors in combat spectacular enough to justify the massive pay-per-view fees. Humans were scheduled to face the Vexcorians in the opening round, a matchup that arena officials expected to last approximately 4 minutes and end with at least 3 human fatalities. The Vexcorians were impressive opponents by any standard. 8 feet tall when fully extended, their crystalline bodies could shift between various states of matter, becoming diamond hard for defense or liquid flexible for mobility. They possessed natural weapons in the form of razor-sharp crystal projections that could extend from any part of their anatomy. They had participated in 7 previous tournaments, advancing to the semi-finals 4 times. Elena Vasquez faced the first Vexcorian challenger. The arena fell silent as the contestants entered the combat zone. The Vexcorian warrior, designated Sharveth the Unbreaking, stood nearly 9 feet tall in his battle configuration. crystal spikes extending from his arms and back, his body gleaming under the arena lights like a living prism. Elena looked like someone's kid sister who had wandered into the wrong building. "This is going to be ugly," predicted the primary commentator. "The human appears to be carrying some sort of primitive tools, but I can't imagine what she expects to accomplish against a creature that can literally reshape its molecular structure." Elena's primitive tools were a pair of small metal objects that she held casually in each hand. She spent the first few seconds of the match studying her opponent's movements, circling at a safe distance, while Shaveth postured and displayed his formidable combat capabilities. Then she did something that no contestant in tournament history had ever attempted. She smiled and waved at the audience. Shaveth charged. Crystal spikes extended, confident that the soft-bodied creature before him would provide brief but satisfying entertainment before succumbing to superior evolutionary design. Elena stepped aside at the last possible moment, allowing the Vexcorian's momentum to carry him past her position, then struck him twice with her metal tools in locations that, according to all available intelligence, should have been completely harmless. Shaveth collapsed immediately, his crystalline body reverting to base form as electrical impulses disrupted his nervous system. The arena was completely silent for approximately 15 seconds. "What?" asked the secondary commentator in a tone of profound confusion. "Just happened?" Elena helped her opponent to his feet. Apparently, the electrical disruption was temporary, and offered what appeared to be congratulations on an excellent match. Shaveth, still disoriented, accepted her gesture with the bewildered grace of someone who had no idea what had just occurred. "Ladies and beings," the primary commentator finally announced, "we have our first upset of the tournament. The human contestant has defeated Shaveth the Unbreaking through some sort of electrical attack. We're reviewing the footage now to determine exactly what technique was employed." Coach Briggs, still watching from the preparation area, made a note in his tactical manual. "Taser effectiveness confirmed against crystalline physiology." The second match featured Dmitri Volkov against a Myrthalai warrior in an aquatic combat environment. The Myrthalai were amphibious creatures who had evolved in the deep oceans of their homeworld, possessing gills, webbed appendages, and bioelectric organs that could generate stunning discharges underwater. The combat pool was filled with water that matched the chemical composition of the Myrthali homeworld, giving their representative every possible advantage. Thaugesh the deep swimmer was considered one of the most dangerous aquatic combatants in tournament history, capable of remaining submerged indefinitely and delivering electrical attacks that could incapacitate most known species. Dmitri entered the pool wearing what appeared to be primitive breathing apparatus and carrying a collection of small objects that arena officials had identified as traditionally employed in human cultural combat practices. The match began with Thaugesh diving immediately to the bottom of the pool, using his natural camouflage abilities to blend with the artificial reef structures. Standard tactics called for remaining hidden until the surface-dwelling opponent was forced to dive, then striking from ambush while they struggled with unfamiliar aquatic conditions. Dmitri floated calmly on the surface for several minutes, apparently unconcerned by his opponent's disappearance. Then, he began dropping his small objects into the water at regular intervals. "What is the human doing?" wondered the primary commentator. "Those appear to be some sort of chemical capsules, but I can't imagine what effect they could have in this volume of water." The effect became apparent when Thaugesh suddenly burst from the water, thrashing wildly and making sounds that the translation systems identified as expressions of extreme discomfort. "The pool chemistry has been altered," reported the secondary commentator after consulting with arena technicians. "The human has introduced a substance that's causing severe irritation to the Myrthali's gill structures. This is remarkably unpleasant to observe." Dmitri helped his opponent out of the pool and offered him access to a device that apparently provided clean water for gill irrigation, a gesture that Thaugesh accepted gratefully once he could breathe properly again. "Another human victory," announced the primary commentator, his tone suggesting he was beginning to question fundamental assumptions about tournament organization. "The technique appears to have been some sort of chemical warfare, though I'm told the substances used are considered safe for most species and are apparently employed in human domestic cleaning processes. Coach Briggs made another note: chlorine tablets effective against aquatic respiratory systems. The third match was scheduled to be the most interesting of the first round. The Zekthar collective consciousness had never been seen in tournament play, and their representative was actually a group of 12 individual creatures who functioned as a single combat unit. They could coordinate their movements with perfect precision, communicate instantaneously, and react to threats faster than any individual combatant could manage. Kenji Tanaka faced them, alone. "This seems grossly unfair," observed the secondary commentator. "How can a single individual compete against 12 perfectly coordinated opponents?" Kenji spent the opening moments of the match in apparent meditation, sitting cross-legged in the center of the combat zone, while the Zekthar collective arranged themselves in a complex formation around him. They moved with the fluid precision of a single organism, positioning themselves to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Then Kenji opened his eyes and smiled. What happened next defied easy description. Kenji didn't fight 12 opponents. He fought one opponent that happened to be in 12 locations. He moved between them with impossible fluidity, striking at precise moments and locations that disrupted their collective coordination. Each attack was calculated not just to disable individual Zekthar, but to create cascading confusion throughout their shared consciousness. Within 3 minutes, the collective had been reduced to 12 very confused individual insects, each trying to remember how to function without constant mental contact with their companions. "Fascinating," breathed the primary commentator. "The human appears to have identified and exploited a critical weakness in collective consciousness systems. By disrupting their neural synchronization at precisely calculated intervals, he's managed to fragment their group mind into individual components." Kenji helped each of the disoriented Zekthar to their feet and appeared to be offering them some sort of traditional human calming ritual involving controlled breathing exercises. Coach Briggs made a third note: pressure point techniques effective against hive mind coordination nodes. By the end of the first day, 3 human contestants had advanced to the second round, using techniques that no one in the arena had ever seen before. The betting pools were in chaos, as oddsmakers struggled to recalculate probabilities based on completely unexpected results. "Ladies and beings," the primary commentator announced during the evening wrap-up show, "we appear to be witnessing something unprecedented in tournament history. The human species, initially dismissed as obvious first-round eliminations, has not only survived their opening matches, but done so using combat techniques that seem almost scientific in their precision." The secondary commentator nodded gravely. "What's particularly disturbing is that none of their opponents suffered any permanent injury. Every other species in tournament history has approached combat with the goal of disabling or destroying their opponents. The humans seem to be treating this as some sort of educational exercise." Arena officials held emergency meetings throughout the night, reviewing footage and consulting with xenobiology experts to understand what they had witnessed. The consensus was troubling. The humans weren't fighting like a primitive species desperately struggling for survival. They were fighting like researchers conducting carefully controlled experiments. The second round promised to be even more interesting. Amara Okafor faced a Corvallian berserker, a creature specifically bred for combat by a militaristic species that had dominated their local sector for centuries. Standing 12 feet tall and possessing natural bone armor, enhanced musculature, and a nervous system that rendered them immune to pain during combat, the Corvallians were considered among the most dangerous individual combatants in known space. Gorth the Implacable had participated in 14 tournaments and lost only twice, both times to opponents who had subsequently died from injuries sustained during their victories. Amara entered the arena carrying what appeared to be a small backpack and wearing a cheerful expression that suggested she was looking forward to the experience. The match began with Gorth charging across the combat zone with the devastating momentum of an avalanche. Amara waited until he was approximately 10 feet away, then threw something small and round at the floor directly in front of him. The resulting explosion wasn't large enough to cause serious injury, but it was sufficiently disorienting to send 12 feet of armored berserker sprawling across the arena floor. While Gorth struggled to regain his footing, Amara deployed several more small devices around the combat zone. "What is she doing now?" wondered the primary commentator, as Amara appeared to be creating some sort of obstacle course using materials from her backpack. The answer became clear when Gorth resumed his attack. The human had turned the arena into a three-dimensional puzzle that required her opponent to navigate an increasingly complex series of mechanical challenges while trying to maintain combat effectiveness. Every few seconds, another small explosive would detonate in a location calculated to redirect the berserker's momentum, or force him to alter his attack vector. Within 10 minutes, Gorth was exhausted from repeatedly charging into carefully positioned obstacles, while Amara appeared to be enjoying herself immensely. "The human has essentially turned combat into a game," observed the secondary commentator. "She's not trying to hurt her opponent, she's trying to tire him out while demonstrating superior tactical thinking." When Gorth finally collapsed from exhaustion, Amara offered him water and what appeared to be a nutritional supplement designed to aid recovery from strenuous exercise. Coach Briggs made his fourth note: explosive devices and environmental manipulation, effective against brute force tactics. The final human contestant, Jackson Reynolds, faced a Thurkarian war priest, a representative of a species that had achieved near-legendary status in previous tournaments. The Thurkarians combined advanced technology with mystical combat traditions, wielding energy weapons that could cut through most known materials while maintaining spiritual disciplines that rendered them nearly immune to psychological warfare. Calth the Enlightened had won 2 previous tournaments and was considered the favorite to win this year's championship. Jackson entered the arena looking like someone who had taken a wrong turn while searching for an accounting seminar. He carried a small bag of what arena officials had identified as sports equipment and wore the expression of someone who was trying very hard not to laugh. The match began with Kelth activating his traditional energy weapons and launching into a series of ritualistic combat movements designed to intimidate opponents while demonstrating superior spiritual discipline. Jackson watched this display with obvious interest, then reached into his bag and produced what appeared to be a spherical object, slightly larger than his fist. "What is the human carrying?" asked the primary commentator. "Our sensors indicate it's some sort of inflatable sphere made from organic polymers." Jackson began bouncing the sphere against various surfaces around the arena, creating a complex pattern of ricochets that seemed to serve no obvious tactical purpose. Calth continued his spiritual combat demonstration, energy weapons spinning in intricate patterns while he maintained perfect meditative focus. Then Jackson threw the sphere directly at Calth's head. The Thurkarian's spiritual discipline allowed him to detect the incoming projectile and calculate its trajectory with perfect accuracy. He positioned himself to deflect it with one of his energy weapons, maintaining his meditative state while dealing with this primitive attack. The sphere bounced off his weapon, ricocheted off 3 different arena surfaces, and struck him in the back of the head, with precisely the amount of force needed to disrupt his concentration without causing injury. Calth's spiritual focus collapsed immediately, his energy weapons deactivating as he struggled to understand what had just happened. The human has defeated a Thurkarian war priest, using what appears to be a child's toy and an understanding of elementary physics, announced the secondary commentator, in a tone that suggested his worldview was undergoing rapid reconstruction. Jackson helped Calth to his feet, and offered to teach him the basic principles of trajectory calculation using spherical projectiles, an offer that the bewildered Thurkarian accepted with the grace of someone who had just discovered that the universe was more complicated than his training had prepared him for. Coach Briggs closed his tactical manual and smiled. All 5 human contestants had advanced to the tournament's semi-finals using techniques that had never been seen in galactic combat sports. More importantly, they had done so without seriously injuring any of their opponents, demonstrating a level of precision and control that suggested combat was not a desperate struggle for survival, but a carefully studied science. The semi-finals were scheduled for the following day, and for the first time in tournament history, arena officials were genuinely uncertain about the probable outcomes. "Ladies and beings," announced the primary commentator during the evening analysis show, "we appear to be witnessing a fundamental shift in our understanding of combat effectiveness. The human species has advanced 5 contenders to the semi-final round using techniques that can only be described as educational. What's particularly disturbing," added the secondary commentator, "is that they seem to be treating this entire tournament as some sort of scientific research project. They're not here to win prize money or achieve galactic recognition. They're here to study us." In the human preparation area, Coach Briggs was conducting the evening team meeting with obvious satisfaction. "Excellent work today, everyone. Elena, your analysis of crystalline nervous system vulnerabilities was spot on. Dmitri, the aquatic chemistry disruption worked exactly as predicted. Kenji, that collective consciousness fragmentation technique was beautiful to watch. Amara, I've never seen anyone turn a berserker into a frustrated engineering student before. And Jackson, well, I'm still not entirely sure what you did to that war priest, but it was definitely effective." "So what's the plan for tomorrow?" asked Elena. Briggs consulted his notes. "Tomorrow we find out what happens when the galaxy's premier combat species realizes they've been fighting Earth's recreational athletes instead of our actual warriors." The semi-finals featured matchups that would have been impossible to predict at the tournament's beginning. 2 human contestants faced opponents from species that had dominated galactic combat sports for decades, while the other 2 humans squared off against each other in what promised to be the most interesting match of the day. But it was the championship round that would provide the evening's real education. The final match pitted Elena Vasquez against prime gladiator Vex Thule, the Draconis Empire's own champion and the most feared combatant in tournament history. Vex Thule had won 4 consecutive championships using a combination of advanced technology, enhanced physiology, and combat experience accumulated over 3 centuries of arena fighting. He stood 14 feet tall, possessed natural armor plating that could deflect most energy weapons, and had never lost a tournament match. His career statistics included over 200 victories and 0 defeats. Elena entered the championship arena, carrying the same small metal devices she had used in her opening match, plus what appeared to be a collection of colorful ribbons that arena officials had been unable to classify as either weapons or equipment. "Ladies and beings," announced the primary commentator, "we have reached the most improbable championship match in tournament history. A human recreational athlete faces the galaxy's premier professional warrior in combat that will determine this year's overall champion." The audience was completely silent as the contestants approached the center of the arena. Vex Thule activated his combat systems, energy weapons emerging from concealed ports in his armor while targeting sensors locked onto the small human figure before him. Elena smiled and waved at the audience again. The match began with Vex Thule launching an immediate assault using every weapon system at his disposal. Energy beams, projectile weapons, and close combat tools created a devastating barrage that should have vaporized any opponent within seconds. Elena wasn't there to be vaporized. She moved through the weapon's fire with fluid grace, avoiding each attack by precisely the minimum distance necessary, while simultaneously deploying her colorful ribbons in patterns that served no obvious tactical purpose. Within moments, the arena floor was crisscrossed with ribbons in complex geometric arrangements. "What is she doing?" wondered the secondary commentator, as Elena continued her strange dance around the increasingly frustrated Draconis champion. The answer became clear when Vex Thule attempted to pursue his elusive opponent, and discovered that the ribbons weren't decorative. They were precisely positioned trap lines that interfered with his movement systems. Each step became a calculated risk as he struggled to maintain combat effectiveness while navigating an increasingly complex obstacle course. Elena used his moment of confusion to strike with her small metal devices, delivering electrical charges that disrupted his armor's power systems without causing permanent damage. Vex Thule collapsed, his weapons systems offline, his armor powerless, reduced to the basic physiology that lay beneath centuries of technological enhancement. The arena remained silent for nearly a full minute. "Ladies and beings," the primary commentator finally announced, his voice barely audible. "We have a new tournament champion. Elena Vasquez of Earth has defeated Prime Gladiator Vex Thule using techniques that can only be described as human." Elena helped her opponent to his feet and offered him the same congratulations she had given to every previous adversary. Vex Thule, still struggling to understand what had happened, accepted her gesture with the bewildered dignity of someone whose entire worldview had just been reconstructed. "The championship trophy goes to Earth," continued the primary commentator, in what is certainly the most unexpected outcome in tournament history. But Elena had one more surprise. Instead of accepting the traditional championship trophy, she requested permission to address the audience directly. "Thank you for inviting us to participate in your tournament," she said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the arena. "This has been an excellent learning experience for our species. We've gathered valuable data about galactic combat techniques, and we've had the opportunity to test some of our own methods against opponents we'd never encountered before." She paused, looking around the arena with obvious satisfaction. "We'd like to propose making this an annual event. Earth would be happy to send different teams each year, maybe our professional athletes next time or some of our military specialists. We think it could become a wonderful cultural exchange program." The silence that followed this announcement was profound. In the VIP viewing area, Ambassador Kylith finally understood the magnitude of his miscalculation. The Draconis Empire had not discovered a primitive species suitable for gladiatorial entertainment. They had found a civilization that treated lethal combat as recreational activity, and had spent centuries perfecting techniques for defeating superior opponents through careful study and creative application of basic scientific principles. The humans hadn't been fighting for their lives or their species' honor. They had been conducting field research while having fun. "Sir," his chief analyst whispered, "we may have made an error in our assessment of human combat capabilities." Kyleth nodded slowly, watching as Elena Vasquez continued to discuss the educational benefits of interspecies combat sports with an audience that was only beginning to understand what they had witnessed. The Draconis Empire had wanted to stage a tournament featuring primitive species fighting for survival against superior opponents. Earth had sent recreational athletes who treated the galaxy's deadliest combat arena as an interesting weekend hobby. And they had won. The universe, it seemed, had an even more twisted sense of humor than anyone had imagined. The galaxy's premier entertainment empire had just learned that there were species out there who considered their deadliest games to be amusing pastimes. Somewhere in the arena's preparation areas, coach Marcus Briggs was already planning next year's team roster and wondering if the Draconis Empire would be interested in hosting a really challenging tournament. After all, they hadn't even sent Earth's good fighters yet.